Okay.
Are you confident in your picks?
I would say I'm confident. Unfortunately, I'm confident on the other side of the Georgia-Arkansas point spread. I hate to be that way, but I do feel that way. And then I would say I feel pretty good about – I'd say I feel pretty good about 4 of these. And I would say I feel pretty good. I would say not a great board for me necessarily, but I feel pretty good. All right. So, Michael, you just tell me when to start talking, and I'll begin. Hey, Dog Nation, I'm Brandon Adams. You know, one of the things we heard a lot over the course of the offseason in preparation for the start of the new year was, hey, you guys going to bring back Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews? And, of course, the answer to that is yes, because it was one of the most fun shows we did back in 2019, and also because it's always fun to get a chance to hang out with Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews. You know them for all of your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. But as I tell you each and every day on Dog Nation Daily, R.S. Andrews is also just a really fun company with really fun people. And, of course, Dari Payro is the top of that list for us. He's also a very, very good gambler with expertise when it comes to making college football picks, which makes this show even more fun to do. So with that in mind, let me welcome in Dari Payro back for another year of Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Dari, welcome in. I know at one point in time, maybe you might have wondered, would we be sitting here talking about college football games with the uncertainty of what the season would hold because of the coronavirus? We finally arrived. SEC slate this week. A couple of conferences have been going already for the last couple of weeks. It is nice to be able to say that college football has returned.
Oh, definitely. I'm so excited. Got some family coming over Saturday, watching the game outside under a pergola. Should be gorgeous weather. Right now, it's even better because we have the change of seasons, the cool, crisp air and smell. I mean, it's just football. And to be able to time that all together and with everything that's gone on this year to kick it off, man, I'm really fired up and excited, and I can't wait.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an incredible time. And I think that part of the preview of all that here on Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews is also a ton of fun as well. So for the folks who may be joining us for the first time this season, let me explain to you how our show goes here. Over the course of our time, we will hear from all of our team of Dog Nation folks, Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley. The Dog Nation Daily audience will get its turn to weigh in on the picks for the upcoming games around the SEC and featuring the best of college football. I'll make my game pick. You can kind of laugh about that. And then eventually, after the consensus has been established, Dari Payro gets a chance to decide if he wants to go with the flow and select the team that most of us have picked, or if he wants to go against that and go with his own idea. It's a fun way for you to also play along there as well. And we'll decide who has the best picks of the season. And over the course of our time, we'll track all those picks. Now, last year, we tracked my picks, Dari's picks, Connor Riley, who was our producer. This year, we're going to keep up with everybody. We'll keep up with the Dog Nation Daily audience. We'll keep up with Jeff Sintel. We'll keep up with Mike Griffith. And we'll truly find out who the best prognosticator is. And, Dari, that's part of the fun, right? In addition to maybe making a little money on some of these picks as well.
Definitely. I can't wait. I kind of feel like I had a couple bad weeks in November and let Connor get that lead. But I closed out strong in the bowl games. I think I was like 13-1.
No doubt.
So I'm looking forward to it. I'm ready to take that title this year.
Yeah, Dari was red hot for most of the season, including an incredible conclusion of the bowl season a year ago. So that's a lot of fun to think about. With all that said, let's start with Georgia here in Fayetteville on Saturday as a 25-point favorite on the road. Arkansas, of course, just 1-23 straight up in its last 3 years of SEC play. So that's a struggling team in conference play. Brand new coach, though, a guy that Georgia fans know well, in former offensive line coach Sam Pittman. Can UGA get it done on the road? But most importantly, can they cover the spread on the road? Mike Griffith, let's start with you. Your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm going to take Georgia to cover that spread. My score for this game is 30-3, and I'm not sure how Arkansas gets through. I just think this defense is really good. I know that the offense at Georgia could be limited in the first game depending on who's starting at quarterback, but you still got one of the best punters in the country, and I just think it's going to be hard for Arkansas to sustain any drives, especially without much of a home field advantage.
So Mike Griffith there taking UGA minus the big number. Obviously, defense plays a big role in that, not expecting the Hogs to score many points. How about our other scribe, Jeff Sintel? Your thoughts on the Dogs and the Hogs?
Kind of like a number like I was saying for the over-under. I kind of like a 38-7 type win for Georgia right there. I kind of peel the onion back a little bit differently. I think Georgia will give up a late touchdown because a lot of those key starters don't need to be in that game mid-fourth quarter, early fourth quarter when they're trying to preserve the depth of the team, especially those first-tier starters, the Jordan Davises, the Richard LeCounts, the Eric Stokeses, the world, Tyson Campbells. Those guys won't be playing in the fourth quarter, and I can see Arkansas putting up a score late, getting us somewhere around 38-7. But I do like Georgia to come.
So Jeff Sintel on the side of UGA as well. So far, it's both of our riders on the Dogs here. How about Connor Riley? You agreeing with Mike and Jeff? What do you say, Connor?
Georgia has won 3 SEC East titles in the last 3 seasons. Arkansas has won 1 SEC game. Georgia should be able to cover the 25-point spread. I think they can at least get to 30 points. I don't expect Arkansas to score more than a touchdown in this game. I don't feel great about it, and part of me does want to go and pick Arkansas here, but give me Georgia minus 25 on the road.
All right, Dari, before I give you the audience pick for Georgia-Arkansas, I do want to point out something, and it's going to be interesting to see if this ends up being a trend for our shows in future weeks. But to keep from boring the audience with too many details, our production schedule for Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews is a little bit different this year. We used to do everybody's picks in something close to isolation where they weren't listening to other people make their picks. They were making their picks without the benefit of that. This year, because of the fact that our riders just aren't on the road as much as they used to be, we had them all together via Zoom broadcast or a video teleconference broadcast to make their selections. I do think there's a little bit of peer pressure, and you're going to notice more of this as these picks are made. A lot of people kind of, between Jeff and Connor and Mike, the people are reading on Dog Nation every single day, it almost seems like they are influencing each other's picks because they are all hearing them make them this year. That could have the potential to be a problem, could it not?
Oh, definitely. I think they'll definitely influence each other into hopefully a lot of wrong decisions.
Yeah, maybe that's the case there as well. Now, the audience, no surprise here. The Dog Nation Daily audience typically pretty high on the Dogs in almost every game. That's true again here this week as well. 74% of our Dog Nation Daily audience weighing in to say they think that Georgia covers the 25 points against Arkansas. And Dari, before I ask you if you want to go with the flow, let me just say here, I wish I could join the so far clean sweep on UGA in this game. I do think Georgia wins the game. I don't think that'll be in doubt at all. But there are a couple things to keep in mind here. First of all, Georgia scored less than 25 points, the number that it needs to cover on Saturday. Georgia scored less than 25 in 6 games in 2019. So this offense, even finding that point total, hasn't exactly been a given. More importantly, as I mentioned a moment ago, while Arkansas is 1-23 straight up in its last 24 SEC games, encompassing the last 3 years of in-conference play, over the course of that same span, for games played in Fayetteville against SEC competition, Arkansas has actually covered the spread 6 of 9 times, 6-3 against the spread in SEC play at home. That's different coaches, of course, but it's been a similar theme for Arkansas over the last few years. Final stages of Brett Bielema, the Chad Morris era, of a bad team capable of making a game somewhat ugly at home, and sometimes teams are just sort of glad to get out of there and move on to the following week. As I said before, I do think Georgia wins the game, but I don't think that Georgia covers the 25. But nonetheless, the flow is with the Dogs. Do you want to go with the flow and take UGA?
Before we get to that, I'd like to kick off the season with an ice-cold beverage.
Very nice. Very nice. You've earned the right to do that. You're a hardworking man. There's a lot that goes on each and every week in terms of taking care of folks and those air conditionings and plumbing systems. A little beverage here to make some picks is never a bad choice.
Never a bad choice. It's always a good pairing when talking Georgia football.
By the way, let me also, businessman to businessman here, say thank you for not being brand specific about the beverage that you're enjoying. That way we don't give a free plug away to anybody. I certainly appreciate that.
Yeah, it's ice cold beverage in a Georgia koozie. And if there are partners out there, I'm more than happy to drink those beers.
Your ad here,
ice
right?
cold beverages. But yeah, I'm gonna go with the flow. I'm taking the Dogs. I actually love Georgia this week. This is one of my dine play specials. Georgia is gonna throttle Arkansas It's welcome to head coaching in the SEC, Mr. Pittman. I don't even know if Arkansas is going to win a single game this year with the 8-game SEC 0 for 8. I think Georgia's going to dominate the clock. They're really going to control the ball in this game. This is going to be a tactical effort and learning session for Pittman that he's going to get. Georgia's defense, as we know, is stout. I think they're the best in the SEC. And really, it doesn't matter who's under center for Georgia this week. The Dogs are going to be able to put it in the end zone, and the defense is going to shut it down. I really love Georgia this week.
You were good a year ago in picking the Dogs, so hopefully Georgia fans, I'm sure, are lining up behind you on this one, hoping that you are right once again. And we're off and running here on Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Before we're done, we'll return to UGA. We'll take a look at the total points expectation. We'll do our over-under pick for the game in Fayetteville on Saturday. Before that, let's move to what I think many people might view as the game of the week in the SEC, although admittedly there's another game I'm more interested in outside the UGA game, but this will get a lot of attention. Auburn hosting Kentucky, Tigers as a 10-point favorite. Mike Griffith, start us off for Auburn and Kentucky.
Kentucky's kind of been the little engine that could, the last few years. They've gotten better. They've gotten stingy, I guess. And, the Auburn game plan, I think Bo Nix is going to make great strides, but I've got questions about that Auburn defense and their ability to get off the field. They lost a lot up front. I think Kentucky's going to be able to move the ball some. Early game, I see a sloppy game. I see Auburn winning, but I would take Kentucky in the points again, thinking that home field advantage ain't what it used to be. And I like the Kentucky mindset. I think they're a little bit more salty than we're accustomed to.
So Mike Griffith calls for the point spread upset with Kentucky going on the road, keeping it close with Auburn. How about Jeff Sintel? Your thoughts on the Cats and the Tigers?
I'm also not buying a home crowd. I don't know about Auburn yet. I think Auburn loses the identity of their team and losing Marlon Davidson and Derek Brown from a year ago. They don't have get dudes like those two that can replace him. Here's what I see. I see a one-score game. I see it being the best game of the slate this weekend. And I also see Kentucky looking at this as their Alamo, where they can quickly make a statement that things will be different in 2020 for the Wildcats. I think there's a little bit of an upset alert here for me with Kentucky, but I still think Auburn wins, but it will be a very tight game.
So you're going to notice the trend that I described before, both Jeff and Mike on the side of Kentucky here. Now, the truth is this could be their authentic pick. I think Kentucky will be a bit of a trendy pick by a lot of gamblers here this weekend, but our riders all on the same side thus far, and we'll find out if Connor Riley continues that. Let's listen to his pick for Kentucky and Auburn.
I like Kentucky in the points here. Their strength is their offensive line. We don't know yet if Joey Gatewood is going to be eligible to play in this game. I'm guessing he's not, so you're going to expect to see Terry Wilson coming off an ACL injury here. I think with the new offense, some of the concerns I have about Georgia's offense, I think I can say the same for Auburn. Though obviously they do have Bo Nix returning, but Bo Nix wasn't all that impressive for the most part last year. I expect this to be a close game just given the way Kentucky wants to play, and I think they'll be able to do that. So give me Kentucky in the 10 here.
So Mike, Jeff, Connor, all on the side of Kentucky. The one thing you should know, though, about our Dog Nation Daily audience, they have a tendency to go with favorites, especially when those favorites are playing at home. Not disappointing here on this one. 57% of our Dog Nation Daily audience takes the Auburn Tigers here. Let me join the audience in my pick. I'm going to take Auburn as well, but admittedly, I'm going against a couple of the trends by doing so. Auburn just 4-3 in its last 7 games against the spread at home in SEC play. So this is not a team that's dominated conference opponents inside Jordan-Hare Stadium, even though we typically think that is a pretty tough place to play. It's also, and I thought this was interesting, according to Oddshark, been nearly 2 years since Auburn's been a double-digit favorite at home against an SEC team. Auburn has covered 4 straight at home as a 10-plus point favorite, but that has not come in SEC play in any of those games, so don't read too much into that. So this is actually a fairly big number for Auburn to be favored at home. SEC West games are typically thought to be pretty close. Georgia-Auburn, kind of from a point spread standpoint, typically viewed the same way. But, Dari, for me, this kind of comes down to I just think of Auburn as one of the more underrated teams in the country. Lost a lot on defense, and yet I have big expectations for Big Cat Bryant. Owen Popo has turned out to be a fine player. Smoke Monday as a safety. There's some talent still left at defense. I think Bo Nix working with better wide receivers than some folks realize. I think this is the kind of game that Auburn announces itself as, and Georgia fans don't love this, but I do believe it's objectively true, announce itself as something of a national contender. Kentucky's a little bit of a media darling. I like Auburn in this game to cover the points. I'm going to take the Tigers. However, the flow is on the side of the underdog Kentucky. Do you want to go with the flow and take the Wildcats?
I'm going with the flow. I'm taking the Wildcats. Okay. I didn't think this pick would actually be with the flow of the majority, but this is the only SEC game with 2 ranked teams this weekend. Auburn has a new offense coordinator, Chad Morris. Who is he? He's the former head coach of Arkansas. So guess what he wants to do? He wants to pass it a lot. He wants to throw to tight ends. He's got a lot of timing routes. Dude, these aren't things that play to the strength of Bo Nix. He's not an accurate passer at all. This is a problem, right? So it's going to be very interesting to see how this unfolds throughout the season for them. The 2 years, with under Morris at Arkansas, their passing offense was ranked 128th in the nation, right? So I don't think this is good. If you look at Kentucky, they return a lot on offense and defense. They probably have the best secondary and linebacker crew behind Georgia in the SEC. I think Boogie Wilson's going to get a sack on Bo Nix. That's a prop bet out there. I like that. Okay. I think in addition to being solid on defense, Kentucky's offensive line is one of the best in the country. They're going to give Auburn lots of problems on both sides of the ball. I love the continuity. I think you're going to find in a lot of my picks this year and a lot of these things early on, continuity is going to be a big deal because you have the lost time of practice and hitting and full contact over the summer. So teams that have a lot of returning players are going to have the edge and a lot of continuity with coaches and schemes. So I like Kentucky to cover, and I also like this as a money line play for Kentucky on the upset.
Now that is fun to think about it. A road underdog winning an SEC play in week 1 would be very entertaining. Dari and I on opposite sides so far of our picks if you're scoring at home here on Go With The Flow presented by RS Andrews. By the way, speaking of RS Andrews, for your air conditioning, heating, and plumbing electric needs, RS Andrews is the one we trust here around Dog Nation, and we'd recommend the same thing to you. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. It's one of the reasons why I feel good about not just making a recommendation for RS Andrews here on the show, but making personal recommendations for the people I know there as well, because I know RS Andrews is going to take good care of the people in my life, and I know they're going to take good care of you. Also know this. It's been a little bit, pleasant the last few days, but hot weather will still be here before the fall is done. So make sure your air conditioning unit still ready to go. If not, they can get it back to factory fresh specs for you. But you need to check them out online at rsandrews.com. All right, next game for us to take a look at. Florida going on the road, the start of the Lane Kiffin era at Ole Miss. I think the big story here for me is the fact that I love the powder blue uniforms the Rebels are going to be wearing on Saturday. Also a chance for Florida to validate some of the national attention they've gotten during the offseason. They play as a 14-point road favorite here against the Rebels. Let's start with Mike Griffith. Your thought on the Gators and the Rebels. Mike, take it away.
Well, Ole Miss is down a lot of players. I'm not even sure they got 85 scholarship players. And, I think, Kyle Trask, he's a returner. He's in year 2 of the Florida offense. And even though I think the Gators have lost some skill position players that were very key, I don't think that that's going to come to light against a team like Ole Miss that's going to have trouble matching up. So I'm going to take Florida to win this game and cover the 14-point spread. My score is Florida 37, Ole Miss 20.
So Mike gives us a TED Talk there, his explanation on why he wants to take the Florida Gators. Jeff Sintel, how about your thoughts on Florida and Ole Miss? Take it away.
So you got to like Ole Miss, though, with this creative wizardry of Lane Kiffin. They're going to have John Rice Plumlee. They're going to have Jerry and Ely. They're going to be at home. I don't know about Florida's ability to put up a lot of points. Defensively, I think they're going to be salty. I can see something evolving into a 30-14 win. I see Florida covering, but it's not by a lot, and it's not one that's going to get Gator Nation Daily really excited about the result. They're going to come out of that game in Oxford a little bit worried more about their leaky defense than their ability to really put up a big number against Ole Miss.
So both of our scribes thus far on the side of the Gators. The Lane Kiffin debut getting very little love thus far. Connor Riley, though, Can you tell us how you think it's going to unfold in Oxford between Ole Miss and Florida? Connor, what do you got?
I'm going to go Ole Miss and the 14 points. I don't expect them to win, but I expect them to keep it close. I think the running combination of John Rice Plumlee and Jerrion Ely is going to make things very difficult for this Florida defense. And as much as we all like, I think, the Florida offense and what they're able to do, until they prove to me that they can consistently run the football in a dominant manner, I have questions about them covering against lesser talented teams. So until I see that, I'm going to take Ole Miss here in the 14 points.
So Connor finally breaks the streak, becomes the first of one of our riders to go against the grain with the others. He takes Ole Miss here to keep it closer than the 14 points will allow. As far as the Dog Nation Daily audience goes, you all should know, and many of you are aware, I have kind of indoctrinated them to all be Gator haters. So generally speaking, the Dog Nation Daily audience goes against Florida, 66% in this case, on the side of Ole Miss to cover the spread at home at Vaught Hemingway Stadium on Saturday. Very little tailgating in the Grove, if any at all. So, that's going to be a little bit of a factor there. But ultimately, they on the side of Ole Miss for the game on Saturday. So keep that in mind there. This is one of those things, Dari. This has been a little bit of a theme for me already in today's show where, unpleasantly having to admit that I'm not sure Georgia covers the big number, maybe unpleasantly on my side anyway, touting for Auburn against Kentucky. And I find myself having to admit something about Florida that I don't really like to admit. I am still a big believer that Dan Mullen, in a game against a coach like Kirby Smart, is just not capable of validating himself in a game like that. I don't think he has the same caliber of program. But the one thing that Mullen has been good at Florida is handling his business in the other games. In the games that you would think that Florida's supposed to win, they've done a good job of not just meeting expectations, but in many cases exceeding expectations. I'll give you a number here. On the road as a 14-point favorite on Saturday. In those previous spots the last 2 years, going back to Dan Mullen's campaign in Gainesville, 2018, 2019, they've been 5-1 against the spread on the road as a favorite here. So big number hasn't been a problem for Florida, even when playing on the road. If I'm getting to choose the games I pick, maybe I don't gravitate towards Florida and Ole Miss, but as a part of the contest we have going here, I'm actually fairly confident Florida covers this 14, although I don't take pleasure in admitting that. So give me Florida here. That puts the flow on the side of Florida. Do you want to go with the flow and take the Gators?
Yeah, I guess I'm just going to continue going with the flow so far. Definitely taking the Gators here. I really like them. Lane Kiffin is going to be fun in the SEC, but it's going to take some time. Right now he's trying to roll out a new offense, new defensive scheme. It's just going to be work in progress on both sides of the ball. Last year, Ole Miss had the worst pass defense in the SEC. If you look at it, when Trask took over at Florida, they started putting up a lot of points. He almost averaged 300 yards passing. They started, scoring 33 plus points a game. I think that continues. I think they're going to light them up. And I think Florida's defense is really solid in a lot of places. And again, they have a lot of continuity, a lot of people coming back. They're just going to shut down the Rebels. I mean, I see Florida easily covering this game.
Let me do one football point on this, and then we'll move on and talk about Mississippi State and LSU. I think if this were the old Ole Miss, the one that was led by Matt Luke, and we saw a game plan similar to what we saw against LSU last year, where they leaned on John Rice Plumlee's ability to run the ball. Obviously, Jerrion Ely's a very good running back. I think that could have been a recipe for keeping this game close. I sort of get the sense, and, Dari, neither one of us are in Oxford, Mississippi every single day, so maybe from several hundred miles away, maybe my perspective on this is wrong. But I sort of get the sense that Matt Corral, the other quarterback, could be a bigger part of the Ole Miss game plan this year than he would have been in the previous regime led by Luke. Corral may give Lane Kiffin a chance to build the program the way that he wants it to, but I actually think going away from your running quarterback makes it harder to keep a game like this close. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's going to be that offense is changing. It's going to take a while for them to get used to it. This is not a good opening game against a team like Florida that is pretty well balanced on both sides of the ball. Having that running quarterback can extend drives, control the ball a little bit longer to give your defense a break, and they're not going to have that. So I think this is going to be a tough opening game for Lane Kiffin in the SEC.
That is Dari Payroad to Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. As promised, let's stay at least in the Magnolia State in terms of game and team being played, but we'll move on to the sportsman's paradise of Louisiana for LSU hosting Mississippi State. It's also the coaching debut here for the Bulldogs of Mike Leach coming over from Washington State. He's obviously an air raid passing game guru, and he's got a good quarterback to work with. Former Stanford signal caller KJ Costello. As I said before, the Tigers are 16-point favorites, though. The reigning national champions playing their first game in that spot here in Baton Rouge. Mike Griffith, start us off on LSU and MSU. What are your thoughts, Mike?
This is a rivalry that, LSU is really kind of had their way with Mississippi State. Mississippi State's only won 2 out of the last, 20 games or something like that. But, man, LSU had 14 guys drafted. They lose 16 starters. They've got a new quarterback. And I think Mississippi State early is probably more dangerous than Mississippi State late. So this is kind of I'm not going to call it an upset special, but I think this game's going to be closer than a lot of people think. And I'm going to take Mississippi State to cover the 16-point spread, even though it's in Baton Rouge.
Mike takes Mississippi State there, and I'm actually a little surprised at that, just given what I thought I knew about Mike. Him being on the underdog here to keep it closer, a little bit of a surprise for me. How about Jeff Sintel? Your thoughts on LSU, Mississippi State? Which side are you on?
Yeah, we got a lot to look at here. You got KJ Costello, you got Leach, you got all those defections from that great LSU team. I think the last few games, the point spreads have been 26, 16, 30, 3, 2, 5. Closer than you think with these two teams, but you give that what LSU has coming back. They might look a little bit different. They might be a little bit more saltier on defense. Miles Brennan gets the chance to go forward here. But reality in my mind's eye is I think Coco Orgeron can coach LSU to a 14, 16-point victory this week. So I like LSU to cover the number this week.
So now we're finally kind of getting into some split decisions between some of our scribes there. Jeff and Mike on the opposite side of Mississippi State and LSU. You heard Jeff take the Tigers. Connor, for the Dog Nation Riders, break the tie. Your thoughts on LSU, Mississippi State?
While LSU obviously does lose a ton, specifically Jamar Chase, a guy they thought they had this year, there's still a lot of good young talent on this team. A 5-star tight end, Arik Gilbert, former 5-star running back, John Emery Jr. There's some guys that are going to get a chance to finally play now. I will say what does give me pause about LSU in this game is that Mississippi State's just going to throw the ball a gazillion times. And the potential for a backdoor cover from KJ Costello and them trying to get reps does give me some pause here. But I think with just the complete systematic overhaul with what Mississippi State's trying to do with Mike Leach, give me LSU here in the 16 points. But I admittedly do not feel great about it.
So Connor going LSU there as well. The Dog Nation Daily audience going to join him by a narrow margin, though. Just 55% of our Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers on the side of LSU in this game, minus the 16 points. Game made more difficult to pick, obviously, by all of the attrition for LSU during the offseason, the recent opt-outs, including the most high-profile example of that, the Biletnikoff Award-winning wide receiver Jamar Chase. But here's the thing for me, though, Dari, and I know you follow a lot of the Vegas power rating stuff. If everybody in the country is still playing, Big Ten, Pac-12 included, Vegas has LSU still power rated as a top 10 team, even with the departures they've had. Frankly, I don't know how good of a quarterback Miles Brennan's going to be. In this game, I presume that the better quarterback is actually playing for Mississippi State in KJ Costello. But LSU still got the better wide receivers. I think this is an emerging crop of good young running backs at LSU. Defensively, I think they're actually still in pretty good shape. Tigers struggled defensively at the beginning of the season a year ago, but that was before Derek Stingley came into his own. Stingley may be the nation's top defensive player overall. I think he'll prevent some of the defensive breakdowns that LSU had near the beginning of last season. I think Mississippi State is terrible. I think they're actually secretly one of the worst teams in the league, despite the fact that I like what they have at quarterback and obviously Colin Hill's a pretty good running back. Leach has not played defense in any of his previous stops. I don't know why that would start now, and that's a recipe for disaster in the SEC. The over might be a look here no matter how high it is, but ultimately LSU covering the number is actually a game I feel pretty confident with. I will take LSU, and with me, Connor, and the audience, and also Jeff as well, on the side of the Tigers, that puts the flow on the side of LSU. Dari, you want to go with the flow and take LSU?
This is probably the hardest game to pick that I've looked at on the slate. There's so many unknowns, but I am going against the flow. I'm going to be taking Mike Leach and the points. Okay, forget the rest of that team. My confidence lies in his ability to put points on that board. This matchup is very intriguing because there's so many unknowns on both sides of the ball. They both have a lot going on. Like, this would have been great to see these teams play like one of those puff, easy type warm-up games before this game.
Yeah.
And then be able to see what's going on, because then you'd be able to get a better idea of where these teams are, adapting to Leach's air raid offense and where LSU is kind of working through some things. But essentially you have Leach, you have the air raid, you have KJ Costello. The question is, are they ready, or are they going to be a little rusty with that new offense? And with LSU, you have lots of talent. They still have a ton of talent, both sides of the ball. Is it really plug and play? Is this program ready for that? Is next man up? Is that it? I don't know. We don't know, right? So, but what I do know is Bo Pelini is back. Okay. His mailbox money finally stopped coming from Nebraska. He returns back to defense coordinator, at LSU. He was there 3 years under Les Miles. And all 3 of those years, he had LSU's defense ranked 3rd in the country. But he's switching them to a 4-3 scheme, and that's going to take some time for adjusting. So I know you're just saying you don't think they're going to have some miscues on defense. I think they are, and this is not the game for them to be changing a whole new scheme facing Mike Leach's air raid offense on their first outing. So for me, that gives a slight edge to take the points, because I think Leach is gonna have them confused right out the gates. They're still learning some things, and I think LSU is going to win the game because, again, like you said, they have zero defense. Leach doesn't play defense, So I'm going with Leach in the points, but again, this is definitely to me a toss-up type game.
Solid analysis for what I do think is going to be a very fun game. Go with the flow, presented by R.S. Andrews here. Let's move on. Staying in the SEC West, at least for the road team, traveling to Columbia, Missouri. It's the Alabama Crimson Tide against Missouri. There are a lot of home underdogs this week in the SEC, as many as I think you'll find. Of course, there's also a slightly larger slate of SEC games than you typically see. But Missouri is one of those 22-point home underdog. Mike Griffith, your thought on the start of the Eli Drinkwitz era there in Missouri with the Tigers and the Crimson Tide. Mike, what do you think?
Game is at Missouri. In the past that at times has caused problems for team, but again, with COVID-19 and no crowd support, I do think travel makes it a little bit tougher on the road team, but I don't think the home crowd advantage has played much of a factor from what I've seen so far in college football. And I think Alabama is definitely more than 3 touchdowns better than Missouri. I think they're probably 5 touchdowns better than Missouri. So I'm going to take Alabama and give 22 points to the Tigers.
So, Mike, on the Alabama Crimson Tide, Jeff Sintel, what about you? The Tide on the road, how confident do you feel?
I think this is the week that really launches Najee Harris into the Heisman Trophy consideration already. I think he's primed. He's back for another season, which seems inconceivable when he came out as the nation's #1 running back, that he would spend 4 seasons in college football. He doesn't have Tua Tagovailoa, but I think Mac Jones and those receivers for Alabama do great. They're going to operate, and it's going to be a very, very tough start for Missouri in week 1 of the SEC.
So both Mike and Jeff on the side of Alabama thus far. Let's give Connor Riley a chance to make his pick for the game.
For me, this spread is too low. This should be like a 26, a 27. As Jeff just laid out, I think Najee Harris might be the best offensive player in the SEC this year. Missouri is missing at least 12 players due to contact tracing, injury, or COVID. Elijah Drinkwitz's first game at Missouri. Nick Saban's not going to do him any favors. I like Alabama to win this game big.
It's been easy thus far, and I think it's going to continue to be easy, at least in terms of how the Dog Nation Daily audience views this one. 71% on the side of the Alabama Crimson Tide. Generally speaking, I think the beginning of the year could be good for underdogs in the SEC for teams that may be concerned about the grind that's still to come. The opposite side of that, though, is for certain teams who feel like they're overmatched, and you've seen a lot of players already announced as being absent for Missouri in this game. This is total speculation, but maybe Missouri seeing a chance to circle the wagons here for a more winnable game the following week against Mississippi State. This feels to me like the kind of game in which Alabama probably wants to play well, with Mac Jones being recently named a starting quarterback and guys like Dylan Moses returning from injury after having not played a year ago. Missouri probably views its best chance to play good football sometime in the future. This just does not feel like a game that's destined to be close. I think in this case, I'll join the clean sweep here and say Alabama on the road. If I'm betting it by myself, I probably leave the game alone. Forced to pick it for a contest, I'm going to take the Alabama Crimson Tide. And Dari, based on your track record from a year ago, I know you want to go with the flow on this one.
Oh, yeah. I'm going with the flow. Not betting against Bama. Not as long as Nick Saban's the head coach there. Throughout the offseason and summer, it just seems like Saban has had, from his press conferences, just a better grasp of coronavirus, his situation with coaching, his staffing, like how they handled that, how they created the importance of keeping his team focused and really on point. And it's all about business. And, he just kind of separated himself to me every time I heard him talk, after practice. So I think this game is going to be like a typical standard statement Alabama ass whooping first game where he's just going to smash this ball running it, leaning on his offensive line down the throat of Missouri all night long. I mean, I think they're going to win this like 50-something to 10. It's just going to be – he's just going to pound it running that ball. He's going to lean on his big offensive line. They're one of the best offensive lines in football. And I think he's just gonna wear them out, man. This is gonna be a standard. Like, here they are, first game of the year. They're at a whole different level right out the gates.
Alabama 8-1 in its last 9 season openers against the spread. Most of that much stiffer competition than what they'll face on Saturday against Missouri. So clearly the Tide has been a very good pick to begin seasons for really a long time under Coach Nick Saban. Go with the flow presented by R.S. Andrews. Let's look at another big spread. This time it's a home favorite. It's Texas A&M, maybe taking a little bit of a deep breath after a very tough start to the year. A season ago, get a chance to host Vanderbilt as 32-point favorites. A&M has dealt with a high-profile collection of opt-outs recently. Jamon Osborne, one of the top receivers in the SEC, he's not playing. Also a starting linebacker gone for the Aggies as well, but a big favorite here in the spot. Mike Griffith, your thought on the Commodores and the Aggies?
I can take them to cover. That's a lot of points. I mean, that's a huge line. That's 4.5 touchdowns, and that's just too much. Even though Vanderbilt could be the team that ends up opting out on the season and just canceling while everybody else plays, it's the opening game, and this is when Vanderbilt's at their best. You remember last year, what was it, against Georgia, 30-6, I think, and that was a pretty good Georgia football team. And I guess it wasn't that long ago that Derek Mason actually beat Kirby Smart in 2016. So it's a good coach. It's as good as Vanderbilt's going to be. It's an A&M team. Jimbo Fisher's not stupid. He's not going to want to show any more than he absolutely has to. So while I think that A&M wins comfortably, 37-13, that's not 32. So I'm going to take the Doors to cover.
That is a lot of analysis for a 32-point spread involving the Vanderbilt Commodores, but Mike Griffith really bringing it there on that one. Jeff Sintel, how about your thought on the Doors and the Aggies?
Yeah, guys, that's a big number, big number. And one thing Derek Mason can hang his hat on is defense and trying to stop guys, hold guys back. Mason will go against a Texas A&M team that's going to be without its leading receiver. They're going to be depleted offensively. I just don't – this feels to me like 29-30. I don't know how this number gets up to 32. Simply said, I'm going to take Vanderbilt in these bushels of points right here, and I'm going to feel good about Vandy trying to cover that number in College Station.
So a little more Vanderbilt love than you may be used to hearing. Both Mike and Jeff on the side of Vanderbilt there as not a chance to win the game, but cover a gigantic number in SEC play. Connor Riley, how about you on Texas A&M and Vandy?
For me, the loss of Jamon Osborne, their top receiver, Anthony Hines, one of the best linebackers, he opted out this weekend. I think the late defections give me a little bit more pause about Texas A&M here. And while I still expect them to win this game, winning it by 32 points is just a little too rich for my blood. So I'm going to take the Commodores here to cover, and it won't be a fun game to watch. But I just 32 is just a bit too much from Texas A&M and Kellen Mond at this point in time.
So Connor Riley on the side of Vanderbilt as well. All three of our riders picking the Commodores. Dog Nation Daily audience, though, disagrees. 66% taking the favorite, even though it's a big number. That's typically what the Dog Nation Daily audience likes to do. They love those home favorites. In this case, I'm going to agree with the audience. I'm a man of the people as it is. No real huge piece of analysis here for me on this. 30-plus point spreads almost defy analysis for the most part. I do think this is a good team, bad team situation. I think A&M may look for wins to be hard to come by in the future. It's a challenging SEC West schedule. They also must play Florida. Getting a chance to flex when you can is probably something that Jimbo Fisher probably wants to do. And Vanderbilt, I think, is a team that certainly gives you a chance to flex. I said before that I think that Mississippi State may be one of the lesser teams in the SEC. Vanderbilt arguably is the absolute worst of all, even worse than the team that Georgia's playing on Saturday. I don't know they lift a finger against anyone all season long. 30-plus points is a little bit of a, crapshoot one way or another. But I'll somewhat timidly take Texas A&M here, minus the 32. The flow, though, on the side of Vanderbilt. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Commodores?
I'm a man of the people too, so I'm going with Texas A&M. I'm going to go against it, not going with the flow. Again, continuity. Vanderbilt, Derek Mason's still there, but everyone else is gone, right? He's got all kinds of new offense coordinator, new defense coordinator, new position coaches. They lost 3 senior offensive linemen right before the season started because they opted out because of coronavirus. Vandy's 3-10 against their last 13 games against the spread. Kelly Mond and Texas A&M has a lot of continuity there, a lot of returning people on both sides of the ball. Like you said, Jimbo Fisher is going to want to put up a lot of points. They're no threat this year for the West, but they are a good team, and they're going to have to put up points where they can. I wish the spread was 30 points or less, but I'm still going to take the Aggies to cover because there's nothing to like with Vanderbilt in this game.
That is certainly well said that way. It's Go with the Flow presented by R.S. Andrews. Coming up, we're going to make our pick on what I personally believe is the game of the week in the SEC. We'll do that coming up as Dory enjoys a little beverage. I'll also remind you that one of the things that may prevent you from right now enjoying your beverage or your lunch or whatever else you have going on here today is situation with your water heater, something like that. Let's say it goes out. The good news is R.S. Andrews, in many cases, can replace it for you the same day. You just got to reach out and find them online at rsandrews.com. Dari and the whole team over there at R.S. Andrews, they'll take good care of you. They'll deliver a smile story after story. That's what R.S. Andrews has been doing. They can do that for you, but you've got to find them online at rsandrews.com. All right, as I said before, I think Tennessee, South Carolina, with apologies to the 2 ranked teams in the Kentucky-Auburn game, I think Vols and Gamecocks is a great game here this week. Tennessee goes on the road as a 3-point favorite. By the way, be careful now. Some late movement on this game moves the line above 3 in some places. Line shop here to get the best number. Let me just say that. So there's a huge difference between 3 and 3.5. But when we recorded our picks with our Dog Nation team, 3 was the number we're going with. We'll keep that consistent across the board. So let's start with Mike Griffith. With the Vols on the road at Williams-Brice Stadium as a 3-point favorite, you got South Carolina, Mike, or do you have Tennessee?
Yeah, it's interesting. South Carolina's actually beat Tennessee 3 out of the last 4 years and 6 out of the last 10. This has been Tennessee's most contested rivalry of the new millennium. And I just don't think it's the pushover. Carolina's the pushover that they once were. And I think South Carolina is going to win this game. Tennessee, they do have an experienced quarterback in Jarrett Garantano, but I don't feel like their quarterback situation settled. They've had a lot of guys in and out with COVID-19. They had some off-campus stuff going on that got guys infected with that. I just don't think it's been a real good preseason for Tennessee. And for that reason, I'm going to take South Carolina to win this game at home by a field goal. I think this betting line is there because of the preponderance of people that will probably pick Tennessee because they won the last 6 games last season. And I think that's created a little bit of a house of cards in terms of how good people think they are. I'm going to take South Carolina to win this game.
So Mike takes the South Carolina Gamecocks, and he takes them to win outright there. Jeff Sintel, for you, the Vols and the Gamecocks, which side are you on? So Jeff going with the Tennessee Vols as a road favorite here in Columbia on Saturday. How about Connor Riley? Your thoughts on the game?
I'm just going to pick South Carolina to cover. I'm picking South Carolina to win outright. Yes, Jeff brings up a lot of concerns about their offense and what they don't bring back this year. But they do bring in Mike Bobo, who I know is an excellent play caller and someone who can scheme up enough points there. I think the Tennessee, with the troubles they've had with COVID, I believe they only had, they had to cancel a scrimmage. I believe 44 was the number of guys they didn't have available. I think the South Carolina defense, while they do lose Javon Kinlaw, they have guys like Brooks Sandage. They have a guy like Jordan Birch. They bring back J.C. Horn as a very talented cornerback, along with the cornerback whose name I can't correctly pronounce or try to say. There's another 5-star defensive lineman whose name escapes me at the moment from the 2019 class.
Zach Pickens,
yes. This South Carolina defense has a sneaky high amount of talent on it. And because of that and the issues and questions I have with Tennessee, they lose their top 2 receivers from a season ago. Add all that up, to me, I think it's a close South Carolina win. It's going to be an ugly, ugly game. And I think that plays into South Carolina's favor here. So give me the Gamecocks.
So Connor on South Carolina there. Dog Nation Daily audience disagrees, though. 59% of our Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers taking the favorite Tennessee on the road, apparently believing in that end-of-season momentum that the Vols had back in 2019. This, for me, is not just a fun game to watch. A lot at stake for both these teams. I think it's actually a really fun game to pick there as well. I think it's the classic mistake to assume big bowl win means big start to the next year. A lot of the momentum that Tennessee established a year ago was also on the basis of close games, close win against teams like South Carolina and Missouri. Those close games have a way of being misleading too. Will Muschamp has not been a great coach in his tenure at both South Carolina and Florida. One thing that he has done is typically pretty well against the Tennessee Vols, last year's game notwithstanding. I think Gamecocks are better on defense than people realize, deeper on the defensive line, really pretty good in the secondary. Offensively, I think Mike Bobo was a difference-making coordinator. I think this team plays slow. I think that they limit their weaknesses, and they still have some on the offensive side of the ball. But I believe they win this game. They not only cover the number, but they win the game outright. I think that Tennessee this season is going to find some of these SEC East games a lot more difficult than maybe Vols fans realize, starting with week 1. I'll take South Carolina pulling an outright upset. And Dari, that puts the flow on the side of South Carolina by a 3-2 edge. You want to go with the flow and take the home underdog Gamecocks?
Definitely not.
Wow.
Definitely not. I love Tennessee. This is one of my other favorite picks on the board this year or this weekend. Like you talked about the momentum, the Vols finished strong last year, winning their last 6 games. On the contrary, South Carolina lost 5 of their last 6 games. Tennessee's going to carry that momentum in this game, man. They got some swagger. They're building. They're the better team on both sides of the ball. Tennessee has a physical defense and a rock-solid offensive line. They're going to uppercut and body blow South Carolina, and that their offensive line is just going to suck the life out of the Gamecocks as they control the clock. They're going to control this game on both sides. I really, really love Tennessee. I also like the under, if anybody's into that for this game. And just so you know, here's some stats for this. Tennessee is 5-1 against the spread in their last 6 SEC games. They're 6-2 against the spread in their last 8 road games. And they're 8-2 in their last 10 games at South Carolina against the spread. I know you're trying to say Muschamp's done well against Tennessee. Well, he's 2-8. Well, he's not there. He hasn't been there 10 years. But South Carolina hasn't done well against Tennessee in South Carolina against the spread. I like Tennessee. Everything's pointing there. They're the better team. Love them.
And, to bolster the point you were just making, the one game that Tennessee didn't cover against the spread in the second half of the season a year ago was the game against Georgia. But really, Tennessee was covering that spread for the entirety of the game until the turnover, scoop and score touchdown that Georgia scored late there that put Georgia over a big 20-plus point number on the road. Prior to that, Tennessee was covering that spread, covered the spread against Alabama, finally started winning some games outright as well. So there's no denying at the very least, ATS against the spread momentum that Tennessee had for really most of the final 2/3 of last season.
Yep. It's
All
going
right.
to carry over.
Speaking of the Georgia Bulldogs, here on Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, let's turn our attention back to UGA before we wrap things up. We made our picks on the game a little earlier. How about the over-under total set at 51.5? I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit of spoiler alert here. There are a lot of people on one side of this pick, and we'll find out if Dari Payro wants to go with the flow on that. Mike Griffith, total for the Dogs and the Hogs. Are you on the over? Or are you on the under of 51.5?
Going to be a fast-moving clock. Georgia's got a more losable game than next week against Auburn. Arkansas's got a more winnable game the next week against Mississippi State. I think the clock's going to be rolling in the second half, and both of these teams will be eager to get out of there as healthy as they can. So I'm going to go with the under in that game.
So Mike Griffith on the under there on that for Georgia and Arkansas. Jeff Sintel, how about you? The number's 51.5. Are you over or are you under?
As a betting man with a couple of extra pennies this week, I would probably go for over-under somewhere in the high 30s, low 40s. I really like the under in this play as well.
And Connor Riley, how about you? So far, Jeff, Mike, both on the under. Do you agree you're taking the under of 51.5 against Georgia and Arkansas?
As well, I believe last year, the Tennessee game is the only time Georgia went over on its point total last year. I think with the new offense coming in, the strange offseason, it's going to favor Georgia's defense. I expect a pretty low-scoring game in this one, so I'm going to take the under on the 51.5.
So clean sweep thus far. Both Mike, Jeff, Connor all taking the under. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers going the same way. Now, typically the audience likes taking overs. That's, as people have said before, like cheering against human achievement to go for an under. But in this case, the audience feels like they've been there before. I'm assuming anyway, 80%, huge total here on the side of the under of 51.5 for Georgia, Arkansas. And Dari, who am I to disagree? I mentioned the Georgia-Tennessee game. That was a game in which the point total went over. After that, Georgia's pretty much under every game, really the rest of the season for the most part. May have also gone over for the Tech game at the end of the regular season. But this was a team that just played unders no matter how low you made the total a year ago, at least in the early portion of the season. Now, maybe Todd Monken makes an impact before it's done. Early portion of the season, brand new quarterback. I'm assuming that this is a trend that carries over year to year. I think this game is well under the 51.5 points, if I had to guess. You want to join the flow, and in this case, clean sweep. You want to go with the flow and take the under of 51.5.
Yeah, definitely. We'll do a clean sweep on the under. I mean, Georgia was 9-1-1 against the spread on unders in their last 11 games.
Yeah.
It continues this weekend. Like you said, we got a new offense coordinator, we got a new offensive system, we got a new quarterback or quarterbacks that may rotate in this game, and we got 4 new offensive linemen that are starting. So that's just equals a work in progress as far as the offense. Until that thing gets fine-tuned, I think George is going to, put up some points, but I don't think it's going to be a lot of points unless the defense gets, multiple scoring touchdowns.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You may be counting on that for something like this. Either way, it should be fun between Georgia and Arkansas on Saturday. And Dari, let me compliment you one more time before we say goodbye here today. Excellent Georgia gear, the Georgia G on the shirt, the all kinds of Georgia paraphernalia on the walls there, the UGA koozie. You're in great shape with all of that. So we look at that. Get the standing dog logo there on the beverage cup. You're looking great, Dari. We appreciate. And by the way, it's nice to be able to see you for the show after having you on the phone last year. Being able to see you here through the magic of video, it's great to be able to do that too.
Yeah, definitely. It's good. Rather be in the studio, but maybe next year when things clear up,
I think that's a plan. That's a plan. Really good stuff. Tune in next week. We'll update you on the standings based on the first week's worth of games. We'll see who got them right. We'll see who got them wrong. We'll invite you to play along with us if you want to go with the flow and decide if you want to join our consensus of experts, phrase used loosely, as we take a look at the best games around the SEC and all of college football. Enjoy the action this weekend. Thanks for being here on Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. We'll look forward to speaking to you at this same time again next week.